Let's jump right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're digging into a truly fascinating ancient masterclass on crisis management, strategy, and perseverance. It's called The Sword and the Trowel: Leadership Under Siege. We're going straight back to the historical texts of Nehemiah to see exactly how a massive construction project survived catastrophic pressure. We're talking about the rebuilding of Jerusalem's walls after a devastating exile. This wasn't just some standard public works project. Getting this wall built was absolutely vital for the survival, safety, and identity of an entire civilization. We're going to extract the exact strategies their leader used to keep his workforce from completely collapsing under sheer terror.
So put yourself in this scenario for a second. What do you do when your absolute biggest project is exactly 50% complete, but you're completely surrounded by enemies and your team is just paralyzed by fear? Imagine leading a massive community effort, where failing doesn't just mean blowing a budget or missing a deadline. In this ancient context, failure meant total exposure. It meant looters running rampant, rival nations sweeping in, and the literal erasure of a people just trying to rebuild their lives. Your team is exhausted, enemies are actively plotting against you, and morale has totally tanked. How do you actually lead through that? How do you keep people focused when everything around them is literally falling apart?
Part 1. A city surrounded, the 360-degree threat. To really understand the gravity of this situation, we've got to look at the massive external pressure pushing in on Jerusalem.
These builders were completely boxed in. Up north, you had Sanballat in Samaria. He was a regional governor who saw Nehemiah's rebuilding as a massive political threat. To the east, Tobiah and the Ammonites, fiercely opportunistic. Down south were the Arabs, and to the west, the Ashdodites, or Philistines. So enemies were actively coordinating on all four compass points. If you mapped out the geopolitics of this exact moment, there was absolutely zero retreat for these builders. They were completely surrounded by a hostile coalition with a deep historical grudge against them, and they had absolutely nowhere to run.
Now, timing is everything, right? The walls were exactly 50% complete when this external threat really escalated. And, the halfway point is often the most dangerous phase of any major undertaking. That initial adrenaline rush is gone, but the finish line still feels forever away. The text points out that when the enemies saw those gaps finally closing and the wall hitting that midway mark, they stopped just making fun of the builders and escalated to a deadly, unified military plot. Progress almost always invites the strongest opposition, and right here at the midway point, when everybody was already running on fumes, the pressure boiled over.
Which brings us to Section 2, 3 layers of crisis: physical, tactical, and psychological warfare. Because the external threat was terrifying, sure, but it was just one piece of the puzzle.
Inside those walls, everything was collapsing under a severe threefold crisis. First off, physical exhaustion. The workers were trying to clear a century's worth of burned-out rubble just to find a foundation. I mean, imagine dragging massive limestone blocks over jagged ruins day in and day out. Second, the tactical threat. There were constant, terrifying rumors that enemy ambushers were going to slip in unnoticed and just start slitting throats while they worked. And third, they were being psychologically battered by fear-mongering from their very own peers.
And check out this absolutely devastating detail. The number 10. Jewish observers who happened to live near these enemies outside the city came back 10 separate times to tell the builders to quit. 10 times. They acted like this relentless megaphone for fear, constantly whispering, "You've got to give up, it's too dangerous, just come back to us." It's that absolute soul-crushing drain of friendly fire, just constant negativity from the people closest to you, insisting that failure is inevitable.
Let's look at Part 3, Praying While Standing Guard, Nehemiah's Dual Strategy. The real question is, how does Nehemiah, the leader, respond to this impossible situation?
Well, he masterfully combines spiritual reliance with hyper-practical action. He doesn't just pray for a miracle, but he doesn't just grab a sword either. He does both. He prays and then immediately sets a guard day and night. And tactically, he pulls off a brilliant move. He deploys armed groups sorted by their own families at the lowest, most vulnerable parts of the wall. By doing this, he gives them a deeply personal stake in the defense. They aren't just defending some abstract civic project anymore. When you put a person in front of their own house to defend their own kids, their resolve becomes totally unbreakable. It is just genius stakeholder management.
Then he rallies everybody with this incredible call to action. Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. He deliberately forces them to shift their focus away from the giant, terrifying armies surrounding them. Instead, he points them to the greatness of their God and the survival of their loved ones. He counters all that rising panic with overwhelming, undeniable purpose. And you know what the stunning result of this extreme readiness is? The enemies actually back down. Without a single sword ever being swung, the hostile coalition realizes their element of surprise is entirely blown. They see these armed families, they realize the plot is exposed, and they retreat. That sheer display of organized, unwavering resolve completely neutralized the attack before it even started.
All right, Section 4, the sword and trowel, building the new normal. So the immediate threat backed off, but Nehemiah knew they couldn't just relax and pretend everything was fine.
He instituted a totally new division of labor. He basically splits his workforce right down the middle, creating this perfect balance between making continuous progress and dealing with constant danger. Half the people are entirely dedicated to building and hauling those heavy stones, while the other half stand fully armored, holding spears, shields, bows, standing guard right behind the builders to protect their blind spots.
And for the builders themselves, the dedication was just absolute. They literally worked with a tool in one hand and a weapon in the other. Or at the very least, they had a heavy sword strapped to their side while climbing up and down the scaffolding. They even set up a trumpeter to sound a rally cry if any section of the massive wall came under attack. The commitment was so intense that they worked from the break at dawn until the stars came out. They didn't even take off their clothes to sleep. They just endured the sweat and the chafing, keeping their weapons in their hands even when they went to get water. Talk about pure grit.
Finally, Section 5, becoming a true builder, extracting the application. So now that we've walked through this fascinating historical defense, let's unpack the real-life leadership principles we can draw from it.
The source material draws this incredibly sharp contrast between two types of people in a crisis. On one side, you have the observers. In our story, these are the people standing on the sidelines, absorbing the panic and coming back 10 times just to complain. Think about the modern workplace. These are the folks furiously forwarding frantic emails and complaining in the break room, but doing absolutely nothing to solve the problem. On the other side, you have the builders. These are the people who actually step up, carry the weight, hold the line, and take real action to protect their community.
The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that trusting in a higher power, or even just having faith in your mission and your team, does not mean lying flat and waiting for things to magically fix themselves. It means standing up, taking responsibility, organizing what you have, and doing the grueling work. True belief shows up as active, courageous responsibility.
As we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. When the pressure is really on, when the project is terrifyingly difficult and the threats feel totally overwhelming, which role do you naturally fall into? Are you an observer shouting from the sidelines, or are you a builder, ready to work and defend at the exact same time? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and keep building.